Ciao e bentornati! Welcome back to Pillole D'Italiano. Today's episode number 53, it's going to be a bit different than usual. You can tell, different location, different idea, let's do something new. So for full disclosure, I am looking into flights to go back to Italy and finally see my family and friends again after almost 2 years. And I started thinking, how about all the other people, all of you who might be planning a trip to Italy this summer or in the next few months and are wondering what to do, not just what to say, because usually in Pillole D'Italiano we deal with the Italian language most of the time. But today I want to let you know how to avoid looking like a tourist when you're in Italy. So let me put a disclaimer out there before we start. I don't want in any way, shape or form to influence you and force you to become someone that you don't want to be. You should always be your most authentic self. These are just recommendations if you want to look and act more Italian, which you don't have to, right? But let's say that you're really proud of where your language is at this point and you also want to look and behave in a more Italian way, this is the right episode for you. Now, before we jump in, I want to let you know that a couple of weeks ago I created an Italian assessment test that you can easily take in, I would say, 5 minutes, and you will find the link in the description of this episode below. I also created a longer version of the test that you can still take for free. You will have to request it from me. If you're curious to see where your Italian is at, especially before leaving for a trip, click on the link in the description below and find out. And now let's tackle today's topic, how not to look like a tourist when you're visiting Italy. There are a bunch of things that came to mind, and the way I got to them was by reverse engineering what happened to me. When I moved to the US, I started noticing all these weird things that Americans do, the things that we will never do in Italy or that we will do differently, and so I just worked my way back to be able to tell you, if you're an American, most likely if you're not Italian, you might have the tendency of doing similar things anyway, so stick around even if you're not American. And yeah, today I want to tell you how to avoid looking like a tourist. I ended up dividing all of these suggestions into 3 different categories. The first one is related to the physical appearance, the way you dress. The second one has to do with drinking, and the third one, of course, with food. Outside of these 3 main categories, at the end of the episode, you will find one specific recommendation about what to say or actually what not to say. So stay tuned, don't miss the last tip. Let's start talking about physical appearance. Once more, you can do whatever you want, but if you wear sandals with socks, you will definitely look like a tourist from a mile away. If you ask an Italian what a tourist looks like, this will be the stereotypical answer. Someone walking around wearing shorts and sandals with socks. You could ask anyone. I know that this is probably stereotypical, and at this point, the tourists that are actually doing this are fewer and fewer. What I've been noticing is now a tendency towards a different type of footwear, especially in summertime. People wearing flip-flops. And that's a big no-no for Italians. We never wear flip-flops. And if we do, it's just at the beach, at the swimming pool, near a body of water, but not in a city center. We don't walk around wearing flip-flops. So if you do, you will definitely look like a tourist. And Italians are really obsessed when it comes to footwear. So that's something that we tend to notice right away. Look down and see what you're wearing. Oftentimes there is no judgment. It's just I guess an instinct because of Prada, who knows where this started, but that's something that we do. And so if we see you wearing the proverbial sandals with socks or flip-flops in a city center, we know right away that you're a tourist. You don't even have to open your mouth. The last thing pertaining your physical appearance and the way you dress has to do with visiting churches. So every time you enter a church, or a cathedral, or any place that is associated with the Catholic Church, you have to be dressed in a certain way, traditionally speaking. You cannot, for example, what I'm wearing right now, showing my shoulders, there is a bit of cleavage here, it's a no-no. I would not be able to walk into a church. If I were to get by the guards and no one were to catch me inside the church, everyone will be looking at me. It's not acceptable. So when you want to visit one of these iconic Italian religious places, you have to be covering your shoulders, for example, with a t-shirt, or maybe bring a shawl, and your upper legs. So, and that's especially important for women, but men too. It's important to have a certain decor. It happened to me a couple of years ago that I was not even thinking about doing any sightseeing. I was hanging out with friends at a lake. Nearby, there was this incredible church, and we decided on a whim to go and see it. Now, of course, when you hang out at the lake, you are wearing your swimsuit, maybe shorts and tank tops. We were not really dressed up appropriately, but we used our towels as shawls, and that was okay. Now, it's not that we were in Italy and everyone is fashion obsessed, right? We probably looked like fools, but we were able to get into the church and visit, and that was our goal. So just keep in mind that if you are planning on visiting churches, and if you are in Italy, when in Rome, you will bump into a couple of them, just bring a shawl, bring something that you could use to cover up when you're entering these places. Oh, and if you're a man especially, this concept does not apply to women for some reason, but if you're a man, whatever you're wearing on your head, a cap, a hat, you will have to remove it before entering the church. All right, let's move on and talk about the drinking category. We have so much to say. Now, the first thing to be said is that in Italy, we don't have that concept of drinking tap water at a restaurant. So when you're sitting out at a restaurant and you order in your perfect Italian acqua del rubinetto, they will know right away that you're a tourist. Acqua del rubinetto, by the way, is water of the faucet, meaning tap water. What do we drink in Italy? Is bottled water. So when they ask you if you want naturale or frizzante, still or sparkling, they're still referring to bottled water, not tap water. Another thing that will out you as a tourist right away is you asking for extra ice. In Italy, we don't really use ice that much in our beverages, not even in summertime. It's not really a thing. I mean, chilled water, yes, maybe you will order a Coke and get a couple of ice cubes, but it's not a big ice culture. So the simple fact of asking for extra ice is going to make you look like a tourist. There is nothing wrong with it, by the way. I just want you to be aware. And if you feel like you're passing out because it's too hot, please do ask for extra ice. As I said at the beginning of this video, you do you. Whatever makes you feel more comfortable, you should absolutely do. Now let's move from water to coffee-based beverages. The most famous hot beverage that you can think of is probably cappuccino, right? Now, cappuccino in Italy is only drank for breakfast. So never past 11 a.m. or noon, never ever. After a meal, we will order a coffee in its regular espresso, or it could be ristretto, maybe a macchiato, which is a coffee with a drip or two of milk, but not cappuccino. So we tend to avoid beverages containing milk during meals. Only for breakfast, you can get your cappuccino. Nowadays, you can go on and order cappuccino, throughout the day, because there are so many tourists in Italy that baristas are catching on that trend, but you will definitely look like a tourist if you order a cappuccino past noon. Another thing you don't want to do is to order a cocktail with your meal. At lunch and dinner, we don't drink cocktails. Cocktails are only for cocktail hour, the famous aperitivo, but not for mealtime. We drink water, wine or beer with our meals, but nothing really sweet. One more drink-related thing that will out you right away as a tourist is drinking too much, meaning alcohol, alcoholic beverages. Drinking too much, getting drunk, wasted, tipsy. We don't do it that much. Don't get me wrong, there are people that drink a lot everywhere in the world. But I notice how, for example, compared to what happens here in the United States, in Italy, the amount of alcohol consumption that is socially acceptable is way lower. So during any given meal, lunch or dinner, it is socially acceptable in Italy to have a glass of wine, a beer. That's it. Second glass of wine, maybe if you're splitting a bottle with friends, yeah, I guess you could get there, but usually it's 1 glass per meal. Another thing we don't do, and that is instead very, very common in the United States, is eating or drinking while walking, while on the move. No, we don't do it at all. Even when we have sandwiches, as Italian tourists visiting other Italian cities, we might just decide to grab a sandwich and not sitting down at the restaurant. And even in that case, we tend to look for a bench, a park, an area where we can sit down and have that meal, even if it's just for 20 minutes or half an hour. So the concept of a drink to go, a sandwich to go, and you're eating, chewing as you're walking is definitely a touristy thing to do. Now let's talk about the Italian meals. First one, colazione, breakfast. It is always, always sweet. It's usually a pastry, something sweet, maybe a yogurt with, cereal, granola, or fruit, but something sweet with your caffè, cappuccino, tea, and that's pretty much it. So Italian breakfast is not huge, it's not the most important meal of the day, and it is not savory. There are a few places now that are starting serving a savory breakfast. It's usually just for tourists, and you will see it in hotels, international chains, where you will have that kind of offer. But if you want to go to a bar to have your breakfast, by the way, bar, the Italian bar is not, it's more like a cafe, right? Just to be clear, it's not the place where you go and get cocktails at 8 a.m. So go walk into a bar, and if you want to look like an Italian, you will order your caffè e brioche, or maybe cappuccino and cornetto. That croissant type of pastry is called cornetto or brioche, depending on where in Italy you are. Another thing about meals in general, do not expect to be able to eat at any time of the day in Italy. We have specific time slots for lunch and for dinner, and that's it. Usually restaurants are closed between lunchtime and dinner time. So lunch, depending on where in Italy you are, but I would say it's in between noon and 2 p.m. And dinner is usually served between 7 and 9 p.m. So if you are just walking around and decide to sit down and have lunch at 3 p.m., good luck. The majority of places will be closed. Maybe they're open, but they only have cold options because the kitchen is closed. And even more problematic would be to actually look for a place to eat at 10 p.m. for dinner. Even in big cities, I come from Milan, so even in that case, it will be tough to find a place that is still open. And now let's talk about the do's and don'ts, especially the don'ts, of when you are sitting down at your lunch table or dinner table. The first thing you don't ever want to do in an Italian restaurant is to ask for grated cheese, classic Parmigiano, for your seafood pasta or any type of dish with fish. No cheese needed, it doesn't go with it. The poor waiter will get a heart attack. Please don't do it. That screams tourist, absolutely, right away, that's a red flag. Another thing that is only done by tourists is to share a pizza. Pizzas are intimate, they're personal in Italy. And that's the reason why, contrary to what you will see here in the US, where the pizza pies are this big, pizza pies in Italian are personal. 6 slices, and you are supposed to eat it all by yourself. Now, one thing that Italians do when they go to a pizzeria will be to order their personal pizzas, maybe swap a slice. Oh yeah, you want to try this one with gorgonzola e noci? Let me try yours with pomodori, pacchino, and prosciutto. But one thing that we never ever do is to order 1 pizza pie or 2 for the table. No, you order your personal one, you can let someone else taste your pizza, that's it. And this leads me to my next point. How do we eat pizza in Italy? You can use your hands, absolutely. That's what we usually do. Sometimes if the pizza has a particularly thin crust and towards the middle the slice becomes thinner, and because of the toppings might just be heavy, we might eat that little piece with fork and knife. But usually as soon as possible, we'll just grab a slice with our hands and go for it. One thing we don't do and you should never do, it's almost a bit insulting towards a pizzaiolo, you know, the pizza chef that made your pizza, is to add anything on top. The pizza arrives to you ready to go, ready to be eaten, nothing needs to be added. And after talking about pizza, we cannot leave behind pasta. I want to address the long type of pasta today, pasta lunga. So that's usually your spaghetti, bucatini, linguine, fettuccine, tagliatelle, pappardelle, and so on. That's the pasta that is long and you're supposed to roll with your fork. One thing that tourists do oftentimes is to cut it with fork and knife to make it short. Well, you know how they say that every time that you clap your hands, there is a fairy that dies somewhere? Well, every time you cut long pasta with fork and knife, there is an Italian fairy that screams in agony. Well, if you cannot cut your pasta, what are you going to do with it? You roll it with your fork. This is how you hold it. Imagine that this is a plate, and this is how you move it. Yay! It's easy, it's fun. You should practice before you go. One recommendation for you all: don't roll from the center of the plate. Roll from any point along the side so that you can just grab a little bit of that pasta dish that you have. If you roll from the center, what's going to happen is that the entire thing will come up. It doesn't fit in your mouth. You just look ridiculous. You'll have to drop it and do it all over again. Expert tip. All right, and after all these wonderful tips about how to dress, what to drink, what to eat, when to eat, and how to eat, let's come to that famous suggestion that I mentioned at the beginning of the episode. A recommendation about what not to say, how not to approach Italians. So let's say that you only know a few words in Italian. This unfortunately happened to me many times. I'm sure that a lot of Italians go through it when they emigrate. People are very excited about letting you know that they do know a few words in your own language. And usually what happens is that if you're lucky, they tell you how they know a few greetings, how they know how to say yes, no, thank you, please. All these words you should know at this point. If you know curse words in Italian, please, for the love of God, do not approach a random Italian, start talking and saying, hey, I know your language, and start cursing at that person. You can tell them, hey, actually I learned a few curse words from a friend of a friend, or however you learn them. That's great, but let's not insult each other unless the other person is asking and is very interested in the specific words that you know. Let's just keep them to ourselves, okay? So that's my last recommendation for the day. Let's not try to impress Italians with all the insults that you know. And I'm telling this for their own sake and for your own sake. You never know which one of these curse words is actually addressing their mother. And we all know how Italians are really attached to their mothers. So be safe. With that being said, I'm going to conclude today's episode, reminding you once more that in the description of the episode below, you will find a link to take the assessment test if you're curious to see where your Italian is at. And you'll also see a link to book a consultation call if you want to get some feedback directly from me, if you want to exchange ideas or ask me questions live, one-on-one. Another way to interact with me, as usual, is to leave a comment in the comment section below. Let me know if you're planning that trip to Italy, if you already have a specific time and place in mind, or even if you need help deciding, I'm here. And drop me a line in the comment section to tell me what you thought of this episode. Did you like it? Should I make more of those? Let me know. Fammi sapere. As usual, if you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to like it. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe so you're not going to miss any future episode. And I will see you in a week. Ciao, a presto!